All right, so I'm just going to say a few words then to kick off. Warm welcome to everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Obviously, a huge thanks to Renee for joining us as well. Just a bit of background on today and a bit of a call for help. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford. I'm one of the organisers of the London CTOs. So I'm not a CTO myself. I run a tech recruitment company called RecWorks. So we've been on a mission for about the last 12 years now to prove that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry beyond just getting people jobs. And that's specifically around mentoring, learning, career development, that kind of thing. So put simply, we aim to create groups and platforms where we connect the people that want to learn with others that are happy to share. So that could be a group basis like today with Renee, or on a one-to-one level. So the biggest example of what we do is our Meet a Mentor platform. Through that, we've made over 2,500 personal introductions. It's all free. And that's really what I could do with a bit of help from. We've just recently set up an aspiring CTO side to that. So if there's anybody out there that would be open to working with more junior CTOs, then please do let me know. All of it's powered by recruitment. So we don't make any money from anything that we do other than getting people jobs. So if you are hiring, if you're about to hire, thinking about hiring, know someone that's hiring, then please do bear us in mind. Anyway, onto this afternoon. So Renée actually came recommended to us by one of our London CTOs members. So she's got over 30 years of experience, has worked with more than 300 companies across North America and Europe. And she's been helping them to connect and adopt new behaviours and become confident members of highly functioning teams. And Renée firmly believes that human connection and talent development are what ultimately drive productivity and contributes to company results. So without further ado, Renée.
That's great. Hi, Barry. Thanks so much. So I'm actually coming to you from Canada as well. So you may hear a little bit of an accent. I'm not too sure if you will or not. Thanks for the great introduction. What I would add to that is that what we've done at Vivo team is we've created a tech-enabled essentially learning and development company, but we're a tech company by virtue of, as Barry said, looking at behaviors. So we've created proprietary algorithm to test behaviors that I'm actually going to give you a chance to try at the end of this session so that you yourselves can figure out what is going on with your team and what's actually costing you money. It'll take you like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, very quick, you'll get a report. So that's a really great feature that we have created and helps us really develop for the C-suite the cost of lost productivity that happens in teams. And for you as leaders, it provides you with a very targeted approach to what are the 1 to 2 behaviors that you need to change to get higher engagement within your team. We also offer the talent solution, which means that we do everything online in a spaced learning format, 1 hour per week. By the way, I'm going to talk about that with regards to your structures as leaders. They shouldn't be long meetings these days. It's getting too tiring for people to have long meetings. So today what we're really going to talk about is this whole idea of as a leader, how can you look at 6 key things within your working groups, within your working teams, to really drive engagement and pull out the gems, those employees who are stepping up, particularly in a crisis. So how can you lead in a crisis and how can you let people step up? So what I'm going to ask is if you can come on video. I love people being on video because I'll call people up to engage with me. You'll get a lot more out of this time together. And also if you could write into the chat right now, as a leader, what is your key challenge that you're having leading your team, particularly during this crisis? All of us are in this space of this huge, huge unknown. And some of us are good at leading through crisis and some of us not so good. All you need to do is think about behaviors, and what you can do a little bit differently to make things go a little bit more correctly. So again, write in the chat, just what's 1 key challenge that you're having with leadership. So 6 things that you need to think about while leading a crisis. The first thing is this whole idea about communicating. And I'm sure you've heard about this yourselves, but it's not just communicating, it's actually making sure that you're taking the opportunity to connect with your distributed, your dispersed, You're possibly, some people are in the office, some people are not in the office. There's people all over the place, and you've got to not only communicate, but deeply connect with them. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, as leaders, it's really, really important that we message succinctly and clearly. For those of you who are like me, I'm what I call an external processor, which means that, kind of like today, I'm thinking while I'm talking. There are other people, and we find that when we work with engineering groups and highly tech-enabled groups throughout the world, doesn't matter culturally, we work all over the globe because we do everything remotely, that there are those that really want to think more before they speak. They want to think about what they're going to say and sort of make it come out a little bit differently, or think it through. Thanks, Chris, for coming up on a video. I really appreciate that. So how do you message succinctly and also make sure that you're providing the truth at all times these days? I've noticed as a leader of my company that what I've done, and it's really been helpful for all of our employees, is I turn my device on once a week, every Tuesday, as a matter of fact. We call it the Connect 2020 video. And I just speak for 1.5, maybe even 2 minutes. And I essentially bring forward the top hits of the week, what is happening this week and where we think we're going, and tell the truth. The truth is really, really important. We work, if you think about it, we work with adults. We're all adults and we can all handle it. For those of you who come from interesting cultures where we want to be nice instead of respected as leaders, now's the time that you really have to think about putting the nice down and being respected. And boy, oh boy, do I ever know that from being a Canadian. Because as Canadians, we have a huge culture of nice. And it is actually quite dangerous during a crisis, because we need to speak the truth and the facts at all time. The other thing that I think about when communicating and connecting is really just chisel it down to a 30-day or maximum a 90-day window. Because as you know, everything is changing weekly, daily right now. Everything is changing within our businesses, within our customers' businesses, and within our employees' ability to navigate the stresses of their workday. Second thing, when you're communicating, repeat, repeat, repeat. So you'll probably think to yourself, oh my God, I said that last week. Didn't they get it? No, as leaders, we have to repeat often and get that message out again as clearly and as succinctly as possible. So often what I think about as an external processor is I might write down 1 to 3 points and just say to myself, those are the 1 to 3 points that for the next 3 weeks, every time I see somebody, I'm just going to take the opportunity in the conversation to revalidate those 1 to 3 points. People will follow leaders who are succinct and who are telling the truth. So it's really important that you as leaders make sure that you find your voice and that you connect with all of the people on your team. The other thing is to make sure that you report on the successes. Like, what's happening? Just little successes. They don't have to be big successes, but what have you noticed for yourself? Perhaps it's just a little win. Like today, I'm having a conversation with a company that I've been working with to bring in to do our analytics and to do our team and leader training for almost 1.5 years now, maybe even 2 years. And it's a little success that I've got another meeting booked and we're going to have a continued conversation. Bring those forward, because in the time of crisis, in the time of uncertainty, people need to have those things that they can point to that are moving the needle forward. And as a leader, that's your job, to communicate, to connect, and demonstrate how the needle is moving forward, even if it's a wee bit. The next thing is, when you are thinking about your successes, notice other people's successes. So particularly in high-tech growth companies or high-tech, possibly just surviving companies right now, we need to pull the gems out of others. And how we can do that is just by asking them, so what's going on for you today? What have you noticed in your workday? What have you noticed in the tasks that you're doing? What's changing for you? When people talk about what's changing, they often report some little wee innovation that they have discovered, something that they're doing differently. Well, that's a success. Take that into your communication and into your dialogue as a leader. So I'm going to ask one more time. All of you are being very, very quiet. What's going on in your days? What's going on that you are challenged to communicate about? Put that in the chat. Just get to your keyboard and write, this is my challenge about communicating right now. And Chris, you're up on video. I'm going to ask you to come up on mic. Have you got a challenge that you would bring forward right now with regards to communicating?
We've just got a new puppy. That seems to be quite a hard communication battle to get over. I mean, work-related, we've gone through quite a shift with communicating support and moving a development team to actually support their own products now that they've got bigger. That was definitely challenging with people's expectations. And we had to repeat over and over and over. So yes, that was our most recent one.
That's awesome. And same thing with your puppy, right? You have to repeat and repeat and repeat. And that is being a good alpha dog, a good leader is to repeat, 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 and to be succinct. And the truth is, as leaders, what we're doing is we're creating discipline. So I think actually, Chris, the puppy example is fantastic. Andy, Andrew, there's Chris, there's Christopher, there's David, there's Mark, Rob, Simon, come on up on video, be a part of this conversation. Get up on chat with me. It's very helpful. We'll make it more meaningful to you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for coming up. I appreciate that. Mark, come on up on mic. Have you got a challenge with regards to communicating that you could share with everybody?
You've got me on the spot now, communication.
Of course, of course. Now everybody that I've asked to come up on video is going, I'm not coming up on video, she's going to ask me something. Come on up and talk to us.
Our challenges, Renee, are concerned with distance at the moment. Obviously, we can't get people in the same room, and particularly we can't get them in front of a whiteboard.
If you can't get them in front of a whiteboard, but you can do that on Zoom, you know, right? With Jamboard.
I know we can do that kind of thing, but it's nothing like, you know, seeing the pen or giving the pen to someone and just scrolling someone. So no, I disagree with that.
Right, you disagree with Jamboard? Or no, you're saying in the brainstorm?
Like getting people in front of a whiteboard, having one person scroll and the other person saying, no, I disagree with that, and just going over there and rubbing something out. It's a very plastic medium if you're in front of a whiteboard. It's harder if you're using a mouse. And
yes, absolutely. So it's interesting that you say that, because we've been working online and digitally for just under 10 years now. And so for us, it's just the norm. We're headquartered on the West Coast, but we have people in Ontario and throughout Nova Scotia on the East. And what I noticed with COVID was immediately as it hit, people throughout Central and Eastern Europe, and now a little bit in the Middle East, have called and said, teach us how to do what you do. So we started with training trainers, but now we're starting to train leaders and managers on how to run effective meetings. And what we have a program called Shine Online, which is all about leaders really understanding how do they shine online, how do they come forward, and how do they pull out people to come forward. So even if you just look at this as our first date together, essentially, we've got probably 12 people online, but 2 of you are willing to come forward. If we did this every hour for the next few weeks, probably by the end of the month, everybody would be confident and comfortable to be online and engaging with us. So Mark, similar thing with brainstorming. I can help you with that with Jamboard, with how to get people connected and looking into how technology actually is a gem. But so thank you again. That's awesome. So the next one, so that's communicating. The most important thing there is that whole idea of making the connection. If you are a leader, manager, and you've sort of thought to yourself, oh yeah, I communicate with my team. You know, I have a pizza night on Thursdays online, and we're really communicating. It actually isn't good enough. Just the how's your day going isn't good enough information for you as a leader to be responsible to the organization as to what is actually going on with your team and what's going on with all of the tasks that you have on your board. The second one is this whole idea of structuring. So how do you put in the structure? Similar to what I was just saying with Mark, if you need to do Jamboard, bring in the technology, sorry, not Jamboard. If you need to do brainstorming, bring in the technologies that support putting up whiteboards, putting up Jamboards, integrating so that your outcomes are met instead of being stuck by the structures. So one of the things that we talk about with teams and leaders is creating bite-sized structures. The thing that people don't recognize is that by virtue of being on camera, there is a different intensity to meetings on Zoom. First of all, we always see, or we often see ourselves when we're on camera. So for us to actually have a mirrored image of ourselves as human beings is quite difficult. We're not used to it. The other thing is that if you think about when you used to sit in a boardroom, people would be doing their own things and you would have sort of a wide view or a wide cast net. But now what you have is you have a very head and shoulders top view, and you can tell what everybody's doing at any moment. Again, it's a different level of intensity. For some people, if they haven't got their workspaces set up, like I'm standing because I need to move during my day, but people who have have gone home don't have that ability. Some of them are working on their kitchen counters, and some of them are working in very uncomfortable chairs at really bad desks. And so sitting for a long meeting is, again, a different intensity. So again, bite-sized structures. And one of the pieces that we do is something called a dose. It's called a direct, ongoing, swift encounter. And it's designed to be exactly that. It takes 10 minutes for a team of 10, and it's really, really easy to implement. For any of you that would like to have a one-pager on the dose, just let Barry know by raising your hand, and we'll send that out to all of you. It's a really easy structure. Essentially, each person says, what am I working on? And it's just a quick statement. Guess what? It teaches people how to come forward. That's a big thing. Thanks, Mark. So people come forward with just a statement of, this is what I'm working on. We go around, so if we were to do a dose with Barry, Chris, Mark, and I would say what I'm working on, then Mark would say what he's working on, Chris would say what he's working on. That's how we do a dose. We just deal with one thing at a time. The idea is I get to have greater awareness of what's happening for me. I get to bring that forward. We create, as leaders, we create a balanced forum in the room, and we get to share a bunch of information in just 10 minutes. The next thing that we will look at is what is my stuck point. So if I have a stuck point, I state the stuck point and I say the impact to the team. This is a really great way for people to start supporting one another, even if they're working in very dispersed teams, because Barry might say he's stuck on working with some particular project, and I'm a pro at that. And so I can say, hey, Barry, after the meeting, let's you and I connect, and I can talk to you about that. The third thing that we do is talk about wins. And again, similar to number one, everybody now gets to bring forward a little win. And that's very motivating for the team. So within 10 minutes, everybody comes at Tuesday at noon, online, just to do a dose. It starts on time, it ends on time. Watch the power of this kind of structure, putting this kind of structure in. We have found with our customers that once they put in a dose, generally their meetings decrease by 50% of time by the end of 30 days. So that's meaningful, because if we have less time in meetings, it means more time to get work done. And particularly sales teams love that. So make sure that you also have one-to-one meetings right now during this time, and make sure as a leader that you're taking the time to make a point to communicate and to connect. So how do we do that again? That whole idea of communication and connection is, again, not being okay with just one-word answers. Yes, I'm fine. Really dig in as a leader. Take this opportunity to step up and understand each person on your team, what they're doing, how they're doing. You'll start to really recognize some gems. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later when we talk about feedback. And then the third one here in this whole idea of structuring is, again, for you to make sure that as a leader that you're essentially structuring in a small bite-sized way, sort of clear goals for 30 to 90 days, like work on a quarter, work on a month, but think about what are the goals for just now. And hopefully, if you do choose just to work on, hey, this month, it's August, our goal is, and just create one goal so that, again, you can repeat, everybody recognizes it, and they know that that is actually the goal. Again, all of these pieces in a crisis, they connect people to the meaning, and they connect people to the why, and they connect people to everything is okay. I just have to focus on this. Again, one of your jobs to make sure that people are connecting and they are structured in such a way that they can still be productive. Any questions, let me know. All you have to do is pop that into the chat. And thanks so much again for those of you who have come up, and thanks Chris for you coming up online as well. So that's structuring. So we've got communicating and structuring, number 1 and number 2. And then number 3 is this whole idea of stay cohesive, paying attention to individual contributors. So if you think about this whole idea of cohesion, cohesion really means that I know what my role is, I know what I'm good at, what I'm strong at, and I know what everybody else on my team, whether it's an agile team that has just been formed for a very short project, or whether it's a long-term project, or actually if it's a cross-functional project, that I understand who is at the table, who's working with me, and what they are good at and what I'm good at. In this way, I can choose not to duplicate tasks and just stay essentially in my swimming lane and make sure that I'm doing what I need to do. And most importantly, that I can rely on others. That's where we get really, really great work done. So if you think about it, during a crisis, what's happened and what do we need to be aware of is that some teams have become very lean. We've lost some people in the crisis for business reasons. We've had to keep the business, but we've had to let people go. And other teams are growing. They're at a stage right now where they may be essential business, or they may have realized that they've made the right decisions early on in the crisis, and now they can start bringing people back, or perhaps they've even created a new innovation and they're bringing people back for the new information. So think about that. We're all in a change, and now we've got lean teams, so we're creating a little bit of stress of, am I next to go? We're also growing. Well, we're growing, so am I ever going to get a new role, or are we just going to bring new people in? There's a lot of uncertainty for employees that you may not be thinking about all the time. But making those roles shifting all the time and giving permission to your team that we are in the midst of change, roles are going to change, and guess what? You have an opportunity, if you step up, to show me what you're really great at, to show me what you're really passionate about, and perhaps that will eventually come into some aspect of your role. Again, we're working with adults, and adults truly want to be accountable, and they want to have career achievement. It's our job as leaders, particularly in a crisis, to consider how can we help people grow within the crisis. And then with change, obviously, comes chaos, comes confusion, and knowing who does what, and making sure that asking questions and that whole idea of this thing that asking questions is not a career limiting move. Some people think that if I ask a question, it reveals that I don't know how to do what I don't know how to do. And that's a career limiting move. Actually, questions are really great gems for opportunities, because questions, let's say a question of, why do we do it that way? Is actually pinpoints or penetrates something that we may have all been doing one way before, and we never really took much time to reflect on it. What I'm finding with our customers is that there's more time for reflection, and in reflection comes innovation, because we start to get excited about what is possible. I've got Chris Galley. Chris, I'm going to ask you something here. What's the one thing that you've noticed in this whole idea of cohesion in your team that's been a challenge these days? Thanks, Chris, for being on video.
That's okay. I work with a number of companies, generally as a fractional CTO or as a non-exec director. So the teams there are generally the board rather than actually having a team of direct reports.
Okay, and so this is what I've noticed was those types of teams, Chris, and I'll ask you if you're noticing that when are you doing remote meetings with them?
Plenty, yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
plenty.
All remote.
Right. So I've noticed that the tough time that level has right now in remote meetings is they're really good at reporting, like saying this is what I'm doing, or this is what I've noticed, or this is where I've come. But the discussion quality has really decreased because they don't actually know with a number of people how to engage in an online discussion. Have you noticed that? Maybe that's a difficulty, or maybe not.
I think the discussion goes on outside the meeting a little bit more.
There you go.
Because you tend to discuss it through other media, either one-to-one or email, or other instant messaging. But that discussion tends to go on outside it, which is I see I mean, you in Canada see a slightly different view with sort of than the British view of working practice, and that communication is slightly different in different cultures. So it's recognizing that actually that communication changes.
Yeah, and we just remember I totally understand that because we work with people in the Czech Republic, Kazakhstan, Switzerland, Germany. We see all types of different interaction. The biggest importance that I'm trying to get at is cross-culture, cross-diversity. The most important thing is creating that connection. And what I've noticed, Chris, in those conversations is that a lot of us as leaders, as managers, I'm not suggesting you this way, but just whether it's in the boardroom or online, actually have a difficulty once the group gets larger than 6 people to engage in a really healthy dialogue that uses essentially a ladder technique of communication where one person weighs in, the other person responds, the other person then gives their viewpoint, the other person then adds to that viewpoint. There is a competence factor once the group gets larger than 6. So probably the reason why people are doing it via email or outside of the meeting might be because of that factor. So what I would suggest for everyone is that if you are wanting to bring up in your structures more communication and connection, that you think about using the technology of breakout rooms. Again, in small bite-sized pieces. So break the groups into 3 or 4 people, give them one thing to talk about. They go and they talk in a relaxed format just with 3 people. And 10 minutes later, they come back and now again, they report on the findings of that conversation. You may have success in layering on those types of techniques. So thanks, Chris. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. So back to cohesion then. Again, as leaders, really important that we know who is here for a job and actually who's here for their career. What we're noticing across everyone that we work with in every country is that people are choosing to be here for a job now because the crisis has settled in and I just don't know if this is going to work. I just don't know if I'm in the right place. I just don't know if I like this. So a lot of companies are reporting to us that their current challenge as leaders is recognizing who is here for a job and they're going to be a flight risk, and who's here actually because they want to develop their career, they're loyal, and they're going to hang in and stay in. So again, as a leader, it is important for you to consider in each of your communications strategically with your people, who's here for a job, who's here for a career, because that is going to have a significant impact on projects and on the possibility of companies having sustained growth. So I really encourage you to think about that. The other thing that we're noticing in structures is if you stay with this whole idea of being cohesive in structures, what will happen is you'll start to really understand who is stepping up to the plate and making sure that they are really, they're getting kudos, and you're starting to understand who is stepping up to the plate. We've heard lots of stories that when people have moved into a different work environment, that they're more productive. They may be working different hours than you're used to, but they're actually very, very productive with those hours. And they're starting to recognize what they love in their role, what they love in their job, and what they want to do more of. That's really exciting. And we can start to now shift and recalibrate the teams to make sure that those people get what they need out of their career. And we're starting to really look at how they can be a significant player within the team. So you're not going to notice those gems if you don't connect frequently and you don't listen, watch, and watch. Number 4, let's look at this whole idea of emotional intelligence. Coping using emotional intelligence. And I'm going to pull off the screen here. We all see it's emotional intelligence. So just so that we've got more people up on video and we can see them. So what's this whole idea of emotional intelligence? We've heard about it for years and years and years. It's a bit of a buzzword, but really in a crisis as a leader, to be aware of my own emotional intelligence, to develop my emotional intelligence, and also to consider the emotional intelligence of the team intelligence. And also we have a now new buzzword, which is called virtual intelligence, which is kind of interesting, not going there right now, but to be aware of myself and to be aware of others. That's my job as a leader, as a team member. So if you think about emotional intelligence, when we at Vivo team talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about having awareness for what's going on for me right now. My emotions actually give me triggers of how my day is going. And if I can connect in with what's going on for me, am I happy? Am I sad? Am I excited? Am I mad? Whatever. That gives me an understanding of my next thing that I'm going to do in business is I'm going to behave in a certain way. So behavioral intelligence comes primarily out of that awareness of what's going on. So I'm first self-aware, and now I can take that awareness and manage my behaviors, manage myself as a leader, manage myself in the face of others, and I can, number 3 in emotional intelligence, I can demonstrate empathy for myself first and demonstrate empathy for others. So how do I do that? Again, all of us are in crisis. Everybody around the globe is in some sort of change, and some of us are handling it better than others. So if I have an awareness of what's going on for me in the crisis, and I can manage my behaviors to come forward to the team in a certain way, or I'll start to perhaps learn different behaviors for myself, I can start to have empathy for who I am and how I am developing. As I gain my own empathy for myself, I can start to have empathy for others. So let's say I've had a particular day where I just haven't felt like I've been on point. I just haven't felt like I've gotten things done. It's just been frustrating, and I just feel like, ugh. Well, I can start to understand how to think about that in a more positive way the next day, or when I meet with my family at dinner time. Well, now if I go and face with my team, and again, in my communication, if I go beyond those one-word answers and I start to hear what's going on for others, as soon as somebody says, I haven't been on point or I've been frustrated, because I've demonstrated empathy for myself and I've felt what that feels like, I can actually demonstrate empathy for them. It doesn't mean you're going to take care of them as a leader, but at least you're going to talk about how that might be difficult. It could be just saying that must be difficult for you. That's having social skills, which is also a part of emotional intelligence. And then the 5th one with regards to emotional intelligence, which is really critically important, is that as leaders, we take all of that information, awareness, management, empathy, social skills, and we become leader assertive within that. So I always say to leaders that I'm working with that if you have co-leaders at your same level, and you can have some sort of discussions about what's going on for you in the crisis, what difficulties that you're having, Then you can turn around, because you've already processed it with some people, you can turn around and have a conversation with your team member without feeling like you're crumbling in the face of them. And when I use the word crumbling, it sounds a little bit dramatic, but why not be dramatic? It's a Tuesday. Let's do that. So think about that whole idea of how do you look at your own coping mechanisms and how do you come face forward with your team for their emotional intelligence. The other thing right now, what we are recognizing is that more and more companies are understanding that they need to really look at this whole idea of investing in rest, because there's not only just the business toll that is happening for people, but there's an undercurrent of the crisis that has gone on long enough that it is taking its toll. So make sure that you bring forward opportunities for yourself to invest in rest, take a break, that you consider for your team to take a break, and that you consider for individuals, once you're listening and connecting to them, who needs a break. So invest in rest is really important. And also it's really important to consider those really highly productive team members who are actually perhaps working longer than they ever have before. Either the team is leaned up and they're taking on more duties, or they are at their home. They may be actually without a family at home and their computer's right there and they can do some more work. So again, you're only going to know that if you really, really connect deeply. So emotional intelligence is important. What I said, I'd come back to this whole idea of don't let one word answers be enough. I think this whole idea of connecting during this time as leaders, it is our responsibility to know what's going on for others on the team. There are, as I said, flight risks. And if we don't take that extra little moment just to understand how people are doing personally and how that links to their professional outputs and outcomes, we've missed a boat. And you don't want to lose a great individual contributor because you just have chosen this week not to connect in with people, or chosen this month not to connect in with people. Be as well empathetic that some of your co-leaders may actually not have the skills. They may have been emergent leaders who hadn't gotten any training or development to actually understand what is good connection as a manager with their team members. So they don't really have the skills yet to do that. Have those types of conversations so that you can make sure that, again, together, you're all working well together. So that's number 4. Using emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-management, empathy, social skills, and most importantly, leadership assertiveness. Number 5 is this whole idea of accountability, focusing on accountability to move the needle forward. So how do we do that? Again, when people are distributed, some are back in the office, some are dealing with a lot of family situations. How do we really drive accountability during a crisis? Again, I've mentioned this, but I'm going to mention it again. Really important to notice who is stepping up, because there are people who, once they have left the office, they've gone into a new work environment, they are stepping up at a higher level, they feel more productive, and they feel like they're getting more done. Recalibrate those roles, allow them to the ability to grow within the crisis. Don't ignore them. And then on the other side, the flip side, with regards to accountability, notice those people who perhaps are here for the job now, not the career. They've what we call quit, but they're staying. So they've quit in their job, they've resigned, they're getting the absolute minimum done. They're kind of know that they aren't really being on watch, maybe as they were before, and they can quit and they can get nothing's really going to happen. They can just stay and do their stuff. Make sure that you, again, connect with the why, like what's going on for them. What is the support that they need as a leader? Because if you can actually understand the support that they're looking for, then you can use that for your own why and your own how of how to motivate them. So often when motivation starts to decline or slide, It's with someone who you have seen them maybe 2 months, 3 months, maybe 6 months ago, do what they're trying to do now, but they're just not, they've just quit and they're resigned. You can go back to those days months ago and think about supporting them with how you noticed their behaviors that they put into place and what it was that they did well. That's motivating. Just connect them back into when they did it well, how they did it, and what to do. And again, direct them, show and focus them that if they go back to those basics or they go back to those behaviors, they will again get that job done well. So think about that. Who's stepping up and who's quit to stay? And Mark, I'm going to call upon you. Have you noticed any of that going on with accountability in your team? There you go.
Highly committed. We've got some very short-term deadlines, and we've got everyone on board for that, which is
that is fantastic. That's awesome. So now, if you are working with a team that's highly committed, now your next step is to start to develop their ability to do coworker to coworker accountability at a higher level, so that it's removing all of it from you. And I don't know, Mark, that might be going on. You can give me the thumbs up or thumbs down, but that's the next step for those of you. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Excellent. Good to hear. Okay, good. So that's number 5. Let's go to number 6, and then I'll open it up for more questions just before we end here. So number 6 is this whole idea of providing quality feedback to the next level leaders. So there's a couple things here. I want to talk about feedback. I want to also talk about this whole idea of next level leaders. So for all of you, you are leaders in a particular area, and then you have next level, perhaps at a higher level than you, or in the case that we talked about the board, you have next level leaders who are adjacent to you, right? So feedback and feed forward, when we do our analytics on teams and with leaders, we recognize that across the board, feedback, feed forward, and follow-up is the most difficult skill set, behavioral set for teams and leaders to activate on a regular basis. Probably just because people have come into it from the standpoint of their personal lives. They've been used to criticism in some sort of state in their personal lives. And so feedback becomes very, very difficult. And yet what we're noticing is that the new millennials they love feedback because they've gotten a lot of it. Their culture has been that they've been grown up with a lot of feedback. So they want it from their managers. So it's our job as managers and leaders to learn how to give, again, in a succinct, clear, communicative way, quality feedback, which is noticing behaviors that have a positive impact or a negative impact on the project, on the team dynamic, on the business as a whole. And then to have a discussion, depending on what level they are, or as a leader to show and focus them, what's the feed forward? Going forward, what are your expectations on their change of behavior so that that impact moves into being a positive impact for the team? And then the last thing is to make sure that we follow up regularly and see how that's going for people. Because change in behavior, especially in crisis, or even outside of crisis, is a difficult piece. So activating feedback, feed forward, and follow up is really important. Change essentially breeds change. So if you're simply rinsing and repeating old stuff, and you're just doing what's required, if you can just take this whole idea, this whole notion of feedback, feed forward, and follow up, for instance, in your meetings, and say, hey, what's working well? What's working well with these meetings, and what really needs improvement? Get people's input, get their feedback. So solicit their feedback to understand what needs improvement, and then test and try a new way. So we talked a little bit about this whole idea of brainstorming and using Jamboard, or what needs a new way with that. There's a great example of how soliciting feedback to understand what would work better might be right in the room. And then we can test it and try a new way for a certain period of time. The whole idea is to as a leader, make sure that you are asking for feedback to get an idea of what can happen differently with regards to your behavior. You're also giving feedback on a regular basis to help people with their career achievement. People want to be accountable. They want to do well, but they can't do well if they don't hear from all of us around the room. And again, in that whole idea of when you've got a really highly committed or really productive team working really well, looking to make sure that coworker to coworker, they are activating their feedback on a regular basis, and you're hearing that. One of the things that we encourage people to do in the last 10 minutes of their meetings in order to get feedback, to inspire and activate feedback, is to do something called, it's a closing essentially, and it's appreciations. So what do you appreciate about the meeting? What do you have difficulty with? And what's a final statement, something that you wanted to say but you haven't had a chance to say. So appreciations, difficulties, final statements. Similar to a dose, you ask and call people by name, ask everybody to come forward with that. If you haven't got active communication, active accountability, active feedback going on, this will start to unlock people and they will start to bring forward quality feedback over time. So think about it, only takes 10 minutes, really good, great way to close down a meeting. The other thing is it helps the next meeting. It leverages the impact of the next meeting because people have put to rest the meeting that they are currently in. They go into the next meeting, they've cleaned their thoughts and they're ready to go, essentially. So again, feedback, feed forward, a really, really important way to think about how can I connect, communicate, and activate new behavioral sets within my team. So what we've looked at today are these 6 key indicators. Communication, that whole idea of connecting. Structures, the whole idea of keeping things in bite-sized pieces, but really, really effective. 3, this idea of cohesion with the moving people in our business, and people are our most important asset. How are we creating cohesive teams? Emotional intelligence. How are we developing our own emotional intelligence within this crisis? And how are we looking at the field of the team and supporting the emotional intelligence of those on the team? And accountability, how are we looking, listening, watching for this whole idea of where are the gems that have appeared in our teams, and where are those who are quit and stay, maybe have a job versus a career. And then lastly, but most importantly actually, is this whole idea of activating feedback on a regular basis, just to understand what is going on all the time. So those are the 6 key indicators. What we have done the research, we have done the meta-analysis to understand that if your working teams, if your project teams have a check mark in each one of these 6 key indicators, whether it's a crisis or not, they are working at the highest level of productivity, they are connecting with one another, they're getting high level career achievement, and the company is really getting the value out of this asset, this people asset. We know this, we test on this with our analytics, and we also teach on all of these areas how teams and leaders can get better. I said at the beginning, I'm going to go to questions, but I do want to put this up so that you have it. I said at the beginning that I'd let you have an insight into how to measure those 6 key indicators in your teams. You can try our demo. Our demo is a shallow perspective of our, what we call the vital statistics report. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes. You get into the demo and just think about your project team, and then just quantify the behaviors that you see on your team against those 6 key indicators. As soon as you hit submit, after I think you do 10 statements, we'll send you a report. The report will show you which indicators are low, which indicators are really high, and it'll also show you the cost of lost productivity within your team. So now I'm going to ask that we open this up for questions just as we end. And if you could put into the chat, and don't be afraid, put it in the chat. I won't bite. What is a particular question that you that you have. And again, thank you for all of those that you have on video. Barry, do you have any question as you've seen what we've gone through today?
Yeah, I actually did have a few questions.
Okay.
It was around the communication side of things. So you spoke two things. You spoke initially about making sure you give succinct and clear communications. Now I'm a long form guy, so typically I struggle to, as most people know, with any of my emails, put anything in brief thing. Have you any advice on how to get to a point where everything you say is succinct?
Absolutely. So I am a long form gal, as you say, as well. So it's taken a lot of being aware of how I'm communicating. Aware is very different than careful. We don't want people to be careful in their communication, because if they're careful, they generally lose their personality, right? Because you're always being careful and you're double checking. That's not the point. It's being aware. So what that means is if I speak to somebody and I've gone on and on and on, that I'm actually aware and I go, oh boy, I could have said that much more succinctly. That's the awareness piece. So next time, try it differently. The second thing is to ask people to repeat back what they heard you say, Barry. So I do that often. I'll just sort of make myself the bad person, and I'll kind of go, you know, I really feel like I rambled on, or I really feel like I didn't get my point across. Would you be willing just to tell me what you heard me say? And when they repeat it back to me, the beauty of it is that for those in the room who were really succinct, they will repeat back what I said in 10 sentences in 2. And boom, there's the next level of awareness for me, because I start to learn from them of how they are creating that thought in a succinct way. So would you be willing to try that, to practice saying to people, hey, would you be willing to repeat back what you heard me say? Because I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah, no, it sounds like good advice. And then you're getting them to do the hard work, right?
Yeah. And you learn. Now, the reason why I asked you if you'd be willing is a lot of people, when they first hear that, they go, oh my God, the other person would be absolutely insulted if I asked them to repeat back. But that's not true, actually. You've just engaged the person in the conversation, and they get to participate with you instead of just listening to you go on and on and on, right? So give it a try. You said you had another question as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to dominate here, but so anyone else, feel free to put the questions on the chat.
I'm sure what you're asking people want to know anyway, so it's okay.
Well, the other one is how to avoid the one-word answers. So certainly got people in the team who don't have that problem, like myself.
Yeah.
And then we've got others who, you can imagine it being, very a long, even trying to get underneath that, and it's difficult to sometimes break through that. So yeah, do you have any advice on that?
I do. I have a couple things to say about that. So one thing is for your own awareness and for yourself as a leader, one of the development areas for you, Barry, and has been a development area for me as well, is to understand that when I stop doing, people will start doing. So it has really been a test for me and a development area for me to choose not to talk all the time. Or when I do speak, to speak succinctly, ask people to repeat back. We've all seen this, whether we're in the boardroom or whether we're on an online meeting. In a meeting of 10 people, 3 or 4 of them just carry on the whole meeting, while others often sit passively by and don't say anything and leave the boardroom without saying a thing. It's actually not good enough. It's not good enough, and it shouldn't be good enough, because we've hired everybody to have a seat at the table because we appreciate their viewpoint, their perspective, and their opinion. And if we as leaders and as co-workers aren't drawing that out, so that's the second part to the answer, how do you draw out the one-word answers? If we're not taking the time to draw out others, we again aren't doing our job. Because if we come to it with the perspective that everyone has a viewpoint, and that viewpoint is important to the project result, then we can go beyond the one-word answers. So how do I do that simply? If I hear a one-word answer, Barry, my simple answer is I ask, can you say more about that? That's it. Can you say more about that? Can you say more about that? And I will often repeat that one statement. Say more. Can you give me more? Can you go deeper? Can you I'm curious, I'm interested. Can you tell me how that goes? And people will start to unlock because they recognize that there is time for them to talk. Those of us who are spilling out words and words and words just have chosen to give them some space as well. Remember, whether I spill out or whether I hold in, it's not, neither one is bad nor good. They're just different behaviors of communicating, right? Is that helpful? Yeah. So what are you going to do differently, Barry, now?
Well, I like this. Can you say more about that? I'm going to say that and things like, yeah. I think it's just, I think, yeah, just try that and try and find a few key phrases and think around that draw things out.
Perfect. The other thing which I'll say is in the virtual environment, one of the norms that we teach, and remember, by the way, for any of you who want that dose, just either put a yes in the chat or let Barry know somehow. We'll get that out to you. But the other thing that we do is we make sure that in virtual meetings, we have another one-pager that we could send out, happy to, which is what are the behavioral norms of this meeting. One of the norms is that it is a voluntold experience. So what that means is that I'm going to call upon right now Chris Arnold and say, Chris, have you got a question? So Chris, yeah, there he is. He comes up on mic. And if we start to make that a norm that we're going to call upon people, and by the way, take it back into the boardroom, it works really well because you get people up talking to you. So Chris, come on up. Have you got any questions or any thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's tied together a lot of things that we're already doing in various guises. We've worked remotely for a long time, so this is just a bit of a lift and shift. The sort of aspects of growth mindset, rest by Alex Pang, radical candor is something that we've been trying to do more recently. But I think feedback's still the hardest one, and certainly feedback from peers or between peers, and trying to get them so that one is open to accepting the feedback, knowing that it's for their benefit. So that sort of hints towards growth mindset, but also kind of coaching people to give it in the right way. Okay, when you did this, I was affected because of. So yeah, that still feels like the hardest one. So if there's a nice, simple answer on just do this and it'll all be okay, that would be good to hear as well.
I've got a suggestion for you with feedback. So one of the things, again, make sure that you add that closing at the meetings, just to get people warmed up to giving feedback. Because appreciation is, something that went on in the meeting that had a positive impact on this meeting. A difficulty is something that went on in this meeting that had a negative impact on the meeting. A final statement is, I just need to say this. I need to get something out. I need to have a voice. The thing that I wanted to say, though, is similar to what Barry asked, where I said, say more, is to teach people to start a sentence with, I noticed. And what we always say is, feedback is giving, when you look at behaviors, you can measure behaviors on your device. Sorry, that's on my blue screen there. On a device or on a video camera. If we teach people to think in a video camera, what is a behavior that I noticed going on? It is always about a behavior. It's not about a personality. It's not about an attribute. It's not about a characteristic. It's something that I did. I noticed that you have come late to this meeting and George was making a presentation. The impact was that George started late. The impact was that George didn't get your viewpoint because you missed the first 10 minutes, whatever it was. But I noticed, and then the behavior. What we find with leaders when we do our leadership development programs is it's very difficult for leaders to articulate behavior. So that's the one first practice I'd suggest. Is that helpful, Chris?
Yes, definitely. But I think the leaders find it a bit easier to kind of give the feedback down to people.
Yes.
It's getting the teams to be self-sufficient and comfortable in going directly to each other in order to improve the team. That's still the tricky bit.
Yeah, and that tricky bit is competence. So again, by just giving them, here's what to do first. Start the sentence with I noticed. And I'd like for the next month, our goal is everybody come forward with something they noticed, one behavior they noticed about themselves in the meeting. Start there. That's kind of easy. And it'll start to unlock. Again, it's a competence piece. Right? Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. So once again, I think we're at time, Barry. And I just wanted to say for all of you to try this demo, to see, and as Chris just said, feedback will probably be the one that's the most difficult for you. That's what we find across all teams. We can help with that for sure. We could actually, Barry, we could do a session just on feedback for people, which might be really interesting, right? People might be interested in that. So Barry, I'll throw it over to you. And thank you everybody for taking this time out of your day. I really appreciate it. Stay healthy.
Likewise, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you all tuning in, and thank you, Renee. Really appreciate that. It was very interesting.